Welcome to Accelerated. I'm your host, Vitaly Golomb, partner and mobility and sustainability global practice lead at award-winning tech investment bank Drakestar. On this season of the podcast, we are hearing from some of the global leaders in everything electric and autonomous, moving us quickly into the future. On this episode, I speak with Asaf Weisbrot, head of Automotive at Nasdaq-listed Otonomo. Otonomo is a provider of a pioneering vehicle data platform and marketplace and is positioned at the epicenter of the data revolution in the automotive and mobility space. Otonomo vehicle data is being utilized by businesses, fleets, and smart cities for a wide variety of use cases, including fleet management, insurance, emergency services, mapping, EV management, parking, and many, many others. Prior to joining Otonomo, Asaf built a 2-decade career in global sales and strategic alliance roles at F5, Cedo, Flash Networks, and others. We spoke about how data is collected from your car and how it is used by insurance companies and others, the secrets of odometers, micro-weather, edge computing versus cloud processing in the near future of autonomous driving, and much more. Asaf, thank you very much. Welcome to Accelerated. We're glad to have you on the podcast. Where do we find you today?
Well, I'm in Israel. I don't fly a lot now, so restricted to working from home and working from the office sometimes. So for the last very long time in Israel.
So good morning and good evening to you. So thanks again. Now, I'd like to start in the beginning to get to know our guests. And my first question is, tell us a little bit about how you grew up and what were you into as a kid?
I grew up in Kiryat Bialik in Israel. It's a place, I would say rather industrial, factories, refineries, this kind of stuff. I was into sports. It was very close to the Mediterranean. I was into surfing. And I think that was the great passion as a kid.
So a lot of athletes, kid athletes, end up going into sales. So I'm not too surprised. But continue.
I didn't know that back then. There was no intention.
Yeah, very good. Now, what did you study you stayed in college in Israel. What did you study there?
I studied computer science and even in high school studied computers and electronics. So started with the technological part very early on, including throughout the army, technological part of the business.
Now, I've heard a lot of startup pitches begin with something in 8200. Doesn't sound like you went through that experience, but yeah, in the military service.
I was in the Air Force, so very far from 8200.
Air Force.
Yeah, so not the same type of technology.
Yeah, and also a lot of athletes go into the Air Force as well. Top Gun. So tell us a little bit about how your career began after you graduated college.
So, graduating for computer science, I think the most natural thing to do was go and work in R&D, and that's what I did. Started as a programmer back in the days, where telecom was very strong, end of the 90s, beginning of 2000, and that's where I started doing development and research in companies that sold into telcos, Converse at the time, and after that, working for some companies that work in networking, more on the side, less on the telephony side, more on the networking side. And from there, I started, I think, the first time I worked for a startup that was somewhere between telco and vehicles. I worked for the Cell, and they were developing traffic forecasting back at the days where phones didn't have a GPS.
Mm-hmm. So that takes us back a little bit. Now, over the years, you've had a number of roles leading sales at various tech companies. What attracted you to the field? I mean, where you talked about you being an athlete, that makes a lot of sense. But you went from computer science and R&D into sales and business development.
Yeah, I would say in general, I'm a very small athlete. I like it, but doesn't make me such an athlete. But I think in general, I have to say it was by chance. I cannot say it was like I took a career choice to go into business. I was working for a company that was acquired by Flash Networks. And after we were acquired, we found out that while there's some synergy between the products, nobody knows how to sell the product. And our salespeople from the company I came from were let go, and I was given the opportunity to lead and sell in the new company the business line that was acquired into Flash Networks. And that's how everything started. I didn't go into sales overnight. I started with sales engineering, got a bit closer to the dark side, and then thought that, I like it with customers and I like to meet people more and sit by my keyboard less. And it was, then the slippery slope started towards sales, towards the business side.
Now, you've had an opportunity to build a few different sales programs, and for startup founders who are coming from the engineering side, sales business development is always kind of this dark science, this wizardry, and they always think that somebody else can come in and do better than them. Talk a little bit about how you've developed sales programs, how you think about it when you're starting with a new product. What's your approach to doing that?
Well, basically, it all starts with the product. It's where the value is generated and it's where the value is created, and it's the role of sales to materialize the value. So if anyone, whether it's a founder or an existing company coming with a new product, eventually it's the role of sales to kind of help product in the beginning see if this theorem of value actually works in the field, and get the feedback back into product so that the tuning is starting. You don't start scale. If we look at the different life cycle of a product, we're looking at insight, a theorem you want to test. We're looking at value, something you can prove it's sellable, and then scale. I think sales has a very important role. So if you're a founder and you're kind of considering moving from this theory part to the value part, take salespeople who can actually help you prove the value before you take salespeople that can help you prove that you can scale, because it's a huge step, a huge milestone in a company's life cycle. Finding this product market fit, I think sales have a huge role in there if you listen to them.
Very good. And then, talk a little bit about some of the specific lessons you've learned from your roles at Flash Networks, CEDO, and F5 Networks before you got to Otonomo.
So I think Flash Network, first of all, taught me something about myself. I went in as heading engineering for the company that was acquired. I left out as a salesperson. And in the middle, I was the first one to establish a pre-sales team, a sales engineering team. And so for me, setting up teams on the R&D side was something I knew how to do. I didn't know how to do it with sales engineers. I didn't hire sales engineers before. Huge lesson. It brought me much closer to the business and actually led me to decide that I'm actually going to continue on the business side and kind of position. I saw a great advantage in being a salesperson that actually knows the technology in depth. So I thought that I really enjoyed that part, that I could do the business part, but still understand the bits and bytes, and that was it was very effective. That was Flash Networks definitely there. CEDO was the first time I was the one to go in there and establish the sales organization from scratch. So that was a lot of learning. I think also I learned a lot about funding and how you should really make sure you're properly funded for the strategy that you're planning for your company, for the roadmap you're planning for your products. There should be strong correlation between those. And also it was the first time I dealt with enterprise products per se. CEDO dealt with virtualization and enterprise customers, not telco customers. That was very new for me. And F5, I think, was the second time as an Israeli I worked for an American company. I worked for Converse, which was an American company, but 80% of the people were Israelis. So it was Nasdaq-listed and headquartered in the US and whatever have you, but lots of Israelis. F5 was an acquisition. I worked for Traffic Networks. We were acquired into F5, and that was the first time I worked in an organization that was 90% Americans, and probably maybe 80%. But that was a good learning, a crash course into corporate America from the inside, not as a salesperson from the outside. So that was a good way to change my point of view, learn a lot about how different companies are setting up larger sales organizations with 2,000 people, not with 100 or 500 or 4.
Well, that brings us to Otonomo, and you have been at the company almost since the beginning. How did you first connect with the founding team?
So I mentioned already that going into F5 networks, we were acquired by Trafix, and some of the people from the old band at Trafix went into Otonomo as joining the founding team. And Ben Volkov, the founder in Otonomo, he was the founder in Trafix, so that was a very good contact point. Going and meeting a founding team that you trust is a very, very significant incentive.
Very nice. Yeah, that's usually a good trigger to jump into a new venture. And the company's done phenomenally well. Only about 7 years old, less than 7 years old now, and is publicly listed. I think for a lot of our listeners, some will know Autonomo, but it's a little bit behind the scenes data companies. So tell us about Autonomo. What should our listeners know?
I think the public part is public. Otonomo is publicly traded. I think Otonomo is the founder of a category. We make a category of vehicle data value creation, vehicle data monetization. And basically, we help automotive OEMs generate value for their vehicle data. OEMs are very good at collecting data. They're very good at processing data. They need someone to help them open up this data to developers, open up this data to potential consumers of the data. This could be insurance company, this could be a leasing company, and this could be a DOT in California that needs vehicle data. And Autonomo knows how to give them one point of contact for vehicle data that can solve the problem when it's an insurance company, solve the problem when it's a fleet or a leasing company, and solve the problem when it's a DOT, and at the same time do it globally. If they are like Stellantis and they operate mainly in North America and in EMEA, Autonomo knows how to do that. Ford, that works on both, we know how to do that. Toyota, that works on both that and APAC, we know how to do that. So those companies need a global partner. They need a neutral partner that's not competing with them, not competing with the potential customers. And they need someone with a superior technology that can reflect their value, that can reflect their sensor value, whatever sensor they have in the car, in a type of data engineering platform that could easily serve developers.
Can you give us some examples of the type of data that gets collected and what kind of sensors you're talking about?
Yeah, so, let's start with the basics. If you look at your odometer, and you might find it a very innocent and boring parameter, you look at it every day on your dashboard. You start the car and you look at the odometer. If you don't read the odometer, trying to conclude what the odometer read is without having access to the odometer is very difficult. And then for some companies that are highly dependent on the odometer for calculation of mileage and fuel, calculation of mileage for service, that's becoming a big issue. If you miss on the odometer a little bit, there's a lot of friction around it. So just this odometer is huge. Of course, the location of the car, the speed, the heading, very basic parameters are helping stolen vehicle tracking, are helping road planning, are helping traffic management, are helping insurance companies to provide you with a dynamic pricing. All those things, very basic features, very basic parameters. But when you go above that, you see that when you look at premium cars and you look at more advanced, technologically advanced cars, you can start collecting friction from the wheel. So you have to understand when the roads become slippery or stops being slippery. So reading the MEW, reading the surface friction, something you can do today. You can collect fog information from the vehicle. You can collect rain information from the vehicle. You can collect road sign information from the vehicle. Which traffic signs does the vehicle encounter and where are they? So that you can dynamically trace those. Of course, everything that has to do with electrical vehicle charging. If you want to discover new charge points and you don't want to do it by trying to track the map or sending scouts, you'll do it by just reading the information from vehicles that are charging. I found a charger, I'm charging now. If the map was not updated with the charger there, then you should add it there. We're looking at hazard signs, everything, weather is something that makes the road safer. Hazard is something that makes the road safer. And we're definitely into pushing those into traffic management and traffic planning so that the roads become safer for everyone. Corridor management, you want to synchronize a green light wave from point A to point B. All those things are data sets that are collected today from the car, and they're collected from more and more cars, so everything could easily impact safety, mapping, any kind of traffic management, point of interest research. All those things are impacted by vehicle data.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very valuable data over a very long period of time of car ownership, and it makes sense for all the cars to have a SIM card now and to be able to communicate, and the OEMs are happy to pay for that SIM card, right? And a subscription just to collect that data. I'm really excited to share something a long time in the making with you. My first online course. Over the years, I've trained thousands of founders through my book, Accelerated Startup, and my infamous Pitching Like a Boss workshops and keynotes. Like I've done for thousands of founders, I will teach you how to pitch like a boss. And for the first time ever, I will be doing it in a cohort-based online course. This is the world's most comprehensive and intensive course for entrepreneurs and future founders on pitching. It will help you craft the perfect pitch for investors and customers. It will also help you master public speaking. Get funded, communicate your vision to grow your team, and dramatically improve sales of any product. Check out golomb.net/pitching, that's golomb.net/pitching for more information. See you there. How much data really is, with a modern vehicle, how much data is flowing? Can you quantify that kind of on a daily basis?
I hear a lot of numbers out there. I can tell you that what we do is we actually collect 4 billion data points per day. And I have to say that...
This is across the entire fleet.
Yeah, for the entire car park that we manage. I have to say that I'm not extremely impressed with the size of the data because, as I told you, one of the most commercially valuable parameters is odometer. You don't need to stream the odometer anywhere. If you collect odometer once per day, it's good. It's good enough. So I'm actually looking into those areas where you don't have to stream, terabytes of data to get value. Because if you already stream terabytes of data, the chance of finding value is very low because your cost is so high. So at the end of the day, you're going to kill the mobile network, you're going to kill the storage, and by the time you have to propose the data to the world, the cost is going to be so high, it's going to be very difficult for me to find a buyer. So I appreciate the technology, but when it comes to doing business with data, we have to find those optimization points where we find, you can collect odometer once per day. Now, there are many parameters that could justify a collection second by second for the right use case, but not for all use cases. And like I said, in general, I'm not impressed with size. I'm impressed with finding the right piece of data. I'll give you an example. If I can collect a certain amount of data from 200 vehicles on a segment of the road, in order to understand that in a certain point on that segment, you have the tail of a traffic jam. So I need 200-300 vehicles to do that. If I can connect to one smart car with a tail of traffic jam sensor, I prefer to find that one smart car or two of them to verify, rather than to constantly process and crunch through terabytes of data just to have a conclusion of maybe. So here again, it's an example why finding the right technology, the right sensor in the car, the right conclusion in the car could save so much processing power in the cloud. Again, when it comes to generating value from vehicle data, I'm hardly impressed with size.
Yeah, no, that's a very good distinction. Now talk a little bit about. I mean, you collect the data obviously from vehicles, and you have to have an agreement with the OEMs. How new do the cars have to be? When did all of this start? This whole automotive data collection. When did this industry start? Let's start there. Let's say.
So I would say that the roots of the industry are in telematics, and telematics are around for 20, 30 years. OnStar is running there for, I don't know, 16, 17 years or maybe more. So it's there. You look at, couriers, and they have telematics for much longer. So it's there, but being there and being commonly available, it's very different. It's two different distinctions. So I would say that if you're looking at most OEMs, 2018, 2019, you'll find enough models that are connected, but Otonomo does not collect data from the car. We collect the data from the OEM cloud. We know how to create connectors that would connect to the OEM cloud and collect the data. So when we work with an OEM, we need them to have a connected car. We need them to collect the data, and we need them to be able to share the data with us through some kind of API. I would say that 2021, it's become more common, and 2022, we'll probably find that all OEMs have the way of doing that. And from that point on, it just depends on how many model makes and years are connected, but I think we're there. We're getting to very close to 100%.
And now you process the data for the OEMs and give them some kind of a dashboard. And then maybe you talk a little bit about other clients who are getting this data and how they're using it. And kind of how do they get the data from you? Is it raw processed data, or is it a dashboard that you show them? And how does it work?
Our customers, if you're looking at the different segments, OEMs are mainly our providers of the data, and we are partnering with them to run a business around it. Our customers could come from the B2C segment, like an insurance company. They could come from the B2B segment, like a leasing company or a rental company that manages a fleet of vehicles, or they can come from any kind of consumers that need a lot of vehicle data to analyze trends. Those could be traffic management companies, traffic planning companies, mapping companies, any kind of companies that are running research on trend that dependent on vehicle data. And so those are examples of companies that could find lots of value in the vehicle data, and they are Otonomo's customers. So first of all, when each and every one of those consumers is reaching the point where they say, we think we have a good way of harnessing vehicle data for our business application. The second they think about that, they say, we now have to chase 10 different OEMs to get enough data, or to get a balanced panel of data. So we have a little bit of, passenger cars, a little bit of light commercial vehicles, some trucks, and so we need a panel. So we cannot spend the time now to talk to 10 of them. We'll do it with Otonomo. We have one contract, we have one API, and we have one vehicle data language that is taking everything all the OEMs are bringing in, all the different types of data, all the APIs, all the contracts, all the prices, mix it all, arrange it, shape it, normalize it, and do all the data engineering work I don't want to do as a potential consumer of the data. And I'll get to Otonomo's data engineering platform. I'll talk to one, I'll contract one, I have one price, I have one API and one format. I don't want to see how the piping works. And that's what Otonomo does on the very basic level. So on the other side, you get the normalized data, but when you want to access the data, you need a way to interact with the data. Imagine all this. You go into the platform, there are tons of data there. You need a way to interact with the data. So you need a way to search the data. Say, I only want the data in San Francisco. So You need to draw a polygon around that. But I only want the data if it's the frequencies collection is above or below 30 seconds. I only want data that arrived on the platform fresh enough. So if it's more than 1 minute or more than 5 minutes, I don't want to see it. And if it's not location and fuel, I don't want to see it because I don't care about weather now. All these things are things that Otonomo is hooking into the data to make it accessible for people to search and understand what they want to see. And then they can decide whether they want to get API access or a dashboard or any kind of report that they want to generate on the platform. But on top of that, after acquiring Neura this year, they can actually get into vehicle data through the eyes of artificial intelligence and get answers to questions they ask. So if they want to understand vehicle average drive time or average speed on a segment, they can just ask those questions, and they don't need to understand vehicle data. They can go and ask point and origin and a destination and try to understand, okay, how many vehicles are going from point A to point B? How many vehicles are going from point A to point B through point C? So they can ask questions that could be on eye level with a traffic planner and not with a vehicle data engineer. I think that's one very important vertical integration we did that makes it much easier for many more organizations to interact with the data without becoming vehicle experts, without becoming data engineers.
No, it's fascinating. I think most people don't really realize or don't think about how much data is collected, and when they open up Google Maps or Waze, where that data comes from, and how do they know, right? Including the micro weather data as well. It's really fascinating, and most people don't. They're probably used to the idea that there are weather stations, every few miles or kilometers, but now you're getting very accurate weather data from vehicles. So it's really fascinating. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit towards autonomy. And a lot has been said, about autonomy and the data that's needed. Both kind of, companies like Enride, who have had Robert, the CEO, on the podcast, they're doing some telematics to be able to drive remotely, kind of like a drone pilot, driving the remotely. But there's a latency issue, and there's a lot of different things that, when you're collecting data, that's one thing, but when you're using that to drive in real time or as close to real time as possible, that becomes really interesting. And then autonomy, ultimately, cars will have to communicate to each other in real time without the lag and be able to react to situations. I'm sure Otonomo has already been looking at that. Would love your thoughts on kind of the state of autonomy right now, this year in 2022, and where do you think we're headed with this in the near future?
Well, I think the most repetitive thing I would say, I could say in this situation, is that 2022 is the year of autonomy after it's been said in 2021 and 2020. So I think I'll try to avoid that. But we do see that, people are kind of, people in the industry and organizations are kind of trying to find an MVP in autonomy where I can deliver something that's not perfect and it's not level 5 or level 4, but it's something that's I would say significant for the driver, and I think that there we do see progress. We see some we see that driverless services are giving green light in Germany for 2022. That's a great breakthrough. I think what General Motors are doing with Cruise and the target they put for 2022. It's amazing. I think in China with AutoX and offering the driverless taxi. These are things that are tangible. Autonomy is not a theory anymore. So when you see, the regulator is moving forward, the OEMs are moving forward, some services are moving forward, that's the way to drive technology. You need good consumers, you need good providers, you need a market, you need interaction, you need friction, things to happen. For me, I cannot say which level we're going to reach, but I see that 2022 is definitely where things are going to get more tangible for autonomy.
When companies start to catch fire in blitzscale and look for capital to fuel that growth, or look to find the right exit strategy, they often seek the counsel of investment bankers. At Drakestar Partners, we work with some of the leading companies in global tech on capital raises, M&A, corporate carve-outs, SPACs, and much more. And we're pretty good at it. Our team of over 100 technology sector experts across 9 offices in 6 countries is comprised of not only career bankers, but experienced executive venture investors and technologists. Drakestar Partners is the #1 ranked and fastest growing mid-market investment bank across US and Europe. While I focus on mobility and energy transition sector, along with all things Silicon Valley, my partners from the Pacific to the Atlantic and around the world lead in software, media, communications, and everything in between. Learn more about us at drakestar.com. There's a lot of kind of thought process around, either doing all the calculations at the edge, right, on vehicle itself, or sending the data via 5G connections to the cloud and then somehow quickly enough processing it and coming back to the vehicle in mass. Where do you see kind of just specifically the data piece? What I'm hearing from a lot of autonomy companies is that the compute that we currently have available for vehicles is not nearly enough for real, full level 4, level 5 autonomy, even level 3, where the driver is not paying attention and it needs to be reliable. That even there, we're not there yet. And autonomy, like you said, it's always just 2 years away, right? Sometimes, even closer, depending on who you listen to. But what are your thoughts around the data collection and kind of how that will influence, and what do you think will be done on the vehicle itself versus in the cloud?
I think whatever you do in the car has a compute limitation. Whatever you do in the cloud has a latency limitation. I don't know. I'm not an autonomous driving expert, but I'm old enough to understand that most of those situations end up with a hybrid solution, and the one that strike the best balance of partly edge compute in the car and partly cloud, the one who strikes the balance in the smartest manner is going to be the first to have a reliable autonomous system. Of course, you also have to take into account they do need to find a good MVP. If they try to attack everything, they get. So that's my thinking. Some things will have to stay in the cloud. Also, when I'm thinking about autonomous driving, I'm not necessarily thinking about a passenger car. I really believe that the first target for autonomous driving will be probably a fleet of some sort, because the ROI is going to be much easier than trying to pay for a very expensive autonomous system where sometimes I actually want to drive. I don't want someone to drive for me. When it comes to a fleet, I look at it differently. And if we agree on that, or we consider that option, if you're thinking about the fleet, you always need a fleet view. You cannot manage it from a vehicle view. So there will be a lot of information that's going to be processed in the cloud, where the information from all of those vehicles can meet each other. They can't meet each other on the car level. They need to meet each other on the cloud level. So that's another reason why I truly believe in a hybrid solution between cloud compute and the compute power in the vehicle.
Very good. Now, is Otonomo looking also at HD mapping and that kind of data that will enable autonomy more so? Are you already in that space, or something in the near future?
Absolutely. The info, even today, we're already at the point where we know how to collect dynamic traffic signs into an HD map. So feed that into an HD map. So, if you have an HD map and someone ran over a stop sign, and the autonomous vehicle is using that stop sign to interact with the road, that's going to be, it could potentially be very, very dangerous. And you cannot keep the situation where the reality and the map don't match each other. So you need to know it's missing. You need to alert the car it's missing. So even today, coming from the traffic sign angle, we know how to harvest data from millions of cars' ADAS systems, take the road signs from there, feed them into an HD map so that they have a very fresh map. Today, maps are updated once every quarter, once every year. We can easily do it daily or hourly. depending on the processing power of the mapping company. So yeah, absolutely, we're going in that direction. But we're already there. We're talking about road that we started doing, work that we started doing 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's really fascinating.
It's not overnight.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, you're seeing more and more cameras on vehicles, all over the vehicles, and you're able to collect a lot of information if you have the right relationships there and use that for really real time, near real time HD maps instead of something that was done once a year ago, which obviously is not that reliable. Yeah, that's great.
Exactly.
No, I mean it's a really interesting opportunity for Otonomo for data in vehicles, and we're just at the beginning. It seems. Where do you see the mobility market headed towards the end of the decade?
First of all, I think that with autonomy, Autonomo has several different opportunities. One of them is to harness the data to help the autonomous technology. The other thing is collect data from the car that's good for other purposes, because there are so many sensors in an autonomous vehicle. And of course, autonomous capability around assisting fleet management with managing vehicle data is going to be paramount for autonomous driving. I'm looking at the end of the decade, and I think OEMs should be, when we look at the OEM strategy of case, connected, autonomous, shared, and electrified, when you're looking at the end of the decades, I think all of those strategies should be already fully executed. You look at different OEMs, what they plan to do with data, what they plan to do with software. Those plans mean that they should be fully connected. And fully connected because it's a target and because it's something that's driving the driver experience to a higher level. It's providing new services, and it's a lot of opportunities for the OEM, but also because the connected vehicle is assisting electrifying the vehicle. It's assisting the autonomous, like we spoke about. It's, of course, assisting the shared mobility. So shared mobility is always about managing a fleet efficiently. It's driven by vehicle data. You can't do it without a connected car. I think OEMs are there already. Electrification is gaining pace, but when you need to deal with the range anxiety, you have to use data to drive better decisions towards the driver, so that they know you can help them, so that they know that you monitor where they are instead of charging, so you can recommend the best charging station for them. Not generally, a personal recommendation that's built on understanding the battery capacity, understanding the road, and understanding the status of electric vehicle charging station to the second. So you give them the best possible recommendation. Yeah, you can only do it in a connected car, and if you can deal with that, you are driving electrification. You are driving the electric car to a place where it's easier to launch. So those are things I think, looking at those end of the decade should be behind us, and automotive industry should be coming with a new target, new strategy that is going to take into the decade right after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating that 2020 and 2021 ended up being the years where electrification became obvious. It became, default conclusion. It wasn't obvious before that. People forget, and it's really interesting to watch how quickly the uptake has happened. And in some countries, in Europe, just now we saw that electric vehicles passed diesel. Just this week, so it's really fascinating to watch, and it's also interesting that that we have connected vehicles first. We have internal combustion vehicles, many of them that are connected, and now electrification, everything is catching up. So if you asked 10 years ago, I think everybody would have said that it goes EV first, then connected. Well, Asaf, I want to thank you very much for being on the podcast. I wanted to ask you one last question to wrap up. You've had a fascinating career so far. You're not nearly done, but you've learned a lot, and you've worked at some really great companies. And Autonomo is really impactful in the automotive industry. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given yourself starting your career?
I would like to say, that my career was so well planned, but it wasn't. It was a lot of it was driven by random. And if I could advise myself, I would say try to plan a little bit more. I did it. What happened, and I'm happy with what I did, and I'm happy with what I do. Very happy with what I'm planning to do. but that was, could use a little less adrenaline in the process.
That's great advice for all the young entrepreneurs listening. Well, thank you very much again. Appreciate you having me on the podcast, and looking forward to seeing what you do at Otonomo. That was my conversation with Asaf Weisbrot, head of automotive at Otonomo. If you'd like to connect with me to discuss mobility and sustainability, you can find me online at golomb.net. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform and share with your friends. We'll see you on the next episode.